I think when I talk about introducing, the idea of discomfort over resentment in environments of grief and it becoming a tool, to me, what that does is it basically, I think, in the macro allows us to begin to introduce the idea that it's okay to feel hopeful again,
Mhm.
that this loss is going to redefine who I am right now and who I'm going to become for the rest of my life. But it can also reshape me in a way that's really wonderful.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Birth Story podcast. If you are joining for the first time today, I'm your host, Alexis C. Girl mom, angel mama to one of the sweetest boys in heaven, birth trauma and uterine rupture survivor, and former NICU mama. Here you will have the opportunity to ask and have your burning questions answered by professionals, feel connected to other women's experiences as we normalize the different aspects of this journey we are on as moms. The real and raw moments of healing are shared here as we navigate loss, embrace strength, and find hope again while learning to live after loss. Please note the topics discussed on this podcast are for educational purposes only. Please see your personalized medical professional if you have any questions or concerns that arise from listening, including diagnosis and treatment. Well, first and foremost, welcome to Beyond the Birth Story podcast. I have heard nothing but incredible things, specifically from Bodhi, who appeared several episodes ago now. And I've been following you on Instagram for a very long time. And yeah, she kind of just, said your praise the entire episode. And I'm like, okay, I got to reach out. Once I put two and two together that you are who you are. So
Yeah.
thank you for being willing to sit down with me. I am very excited to have your knowledge to share with all of our listeners. And, your posts are always filled with great insight. And so don't hold back today. Give us all of the insight.
Yeah, I promise. I will absolutely show up as fully as I know how.
I appreciate it. So I guess we'll just start. I'll allow you to introduce yourself, whatever you want to share. And yeah, we'll kind of just let it flow from there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of introduce myself as an extension of the connection of Bodhi.
Yes.
So my name's Jeremy Allen, and my career is I'm a funeral director and embalmer. I own a funeral home in rural Alberta, and then as an extension of that, I've kind of launched into a grief and loss education platform that I call Death Ed.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of it is to be able to take these experiences and these lessons that I've learned from walking alongside families through very intense loss, and then learning how to reapply them into like more daily settings.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just the outward act of trying to appropriately communicate all of these really great big feelings and emotions that typically accompany loss. And that grief is, of course, um, is of course the really big emotion that is identifiable when people we love die. It's also an emotion that we can reapply into a lot of other settings. And so, yeah, so Bode and I go way back. We grew up together in a small town here in Alberta. And then I just, like it sounds like maybe such a funny way to say it, but I just had the privilege of helping take care of their son Letley,
Mm-hmm.
um, in in all of the ways that moms and dads aren't able to when these little people die. And so, yeah, it's such a unique privilege to have the opportunity to take care of these little people when it doesn't go the way that it's supposed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so that is just a pretty small window into it all, but I'm sure we'll uncover more as the episode unfolds here.
Yeah. So true when you say like the word unique is like kind of a weird word to use in these circumstances. But I even find that when I connect with like other lost moms and things like that, I'm like, it's so nice to be able to connect with someone else who knows. I'm like, that's super weird that,
Yeah.
I'm not thankful that this is why we're meeting, but it is so healing to have others who do understand to be there to help, guide you in this very hard journey that you literally never expect to be a part of. It's,
Yeah, and I mean it
yeah.
just to me it would make sense that it's like this really special club that nobody wants a membership
Mm-hmm.
to. right? But then
Absolutely.
once you're in it, it also doesn't reduce how special it is to be surrounded by those people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that then I think there's a very small percentage of people that can authentically acknowledge what it feels like to lose a child,
Mm-hmm.
and so to be in the presence of those people that do know, there's just typically healing attached to those conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things that has helped me the most is being
Hmm.
able to connect with, you know, other lost moms and even birth trauma moms and things like that. And it's so unique in the sense that every single person's journey is so different, yet you're taking little pieces of what they can teach you when they don't even know that they're teaching it to you. And Bodhi is
Yeah,
a very good example of that. She's always like, I don't know if I said the right thing. I'm like, literally, I haven't stopped thinking about what you said. And it's so true. You overthink it because you want to find those proper words to use
right.
when there really are none.
Yeah, and I mean, there's several people have talked about this idea, but it's what happens is when we end up in these conversations is, in my opinion, when you walk through something as significant as losing a pregnancy or losing a child, um, nobody fucking cares about the weather. We should have asked about your swearing policy before we started. Sorry. Um,
You're allowed.
nobody. Yeah. Okay. Nobody cares about the weather. Nobody
Yeah.
cares how the Oilers are doing. Like nothing else matters, right?
Hmm.
And so when we enter into these conversations with people that have the ability to be emotionally invested in what is happening in your life without emotionally attaching themselves to your loss, there's something incredibly tangible about that feeling.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a skill that can be learned. Um, because I've never personally walked through any of those losses.
Hmm.
It's just I've just practiced it and like practiced how to show up to these conversations in a way and what that ultimately does is when we go back to kind of the entry point of this, like of talking with other people and the lessons that we learn even when they think they're not saying it the right way, very rarely do people remember what you said or how you said it. They remember how you made them feel as a part of that experience,
Hmm.
and that is like such a wonderful place to heal, and then a really wonderful place to learn, because I think a lot of the times we develop so much knowledge by watching other people process their loss,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
that's how I feel about it anyway.
I love that. No, it's a very uncomfortable thing that we are not designed as human beings to know how to even comprehend the significant loss. And I know I was guilty before I lost Cade that it would never happen to me. And, I didn't really know of anyone prior to our loss either. So to have to learn while actually walking this journey and not only have the responsibility of, surviving the grief period, which is everlasting, I'm learning, um, but also taking on the responsibility to teach other people how to and how not to show up for the lost parents
Mhm.
and be willing to sit in what is generally an uncomfortable conversation, but learn to normalize the
Yeah,
conversation, which is exactly
like
why
that.
we're here.
Yeah, which is like it's to attach a purpose to the discomfort. And Brene
Hmm.
Brown, who's a pretty famous psychologist, talks about discomfort over resentment. And when I like regurgitate her words into an environment of grief, to me, what that means is if we can sit in the discomfort of really hard conversations surrounding our loss, it typically becomes the tool that removes the opportunity for there to be resentment attached to that loss, right? That um, at some point in time, without I'm I am absolutely not a believer of like, oh, heaven just needed another angel, or they're in a better place, or all, what, like these age old comments that just make you want to throat punch people because they're
Mm-hmm.
just so wildly inappropriate, right?
Yeah. Where the everything
um
happens for a reason. Like,
yeah, I don't really want to know what your reason is for
no.
this at all. um and so like with complete acknowledgement of how much I have a stance against that, I think when I talk about introducing, the idea of discomfort over resentment in environments of grief and it becoming a tool, to me, what that does is it basically, I think, in the macro allows us to begin to introduce the idea that it's okay to feel hopeful again,
Mm-hmm.
that this loss is going to redefine who I am right now and who I'm going to become for the rest of my life, but it can also reshape me in a way that's really wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I can start to attach some purpose to this pain because I'm not in control of what happened, and I'm not in control of this outcome. Um, but I have the opportunity to allow joy to coexist with this sorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the introduction of that thought process starts to reduce the opportunity for resentment. That we don't, that anger serves purpose in grief. It needs to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just not maybe the emotion that we want to hold on to any longer than possible, right?
Yeah. I'm
So
so
yeah.
guilty of that. I feel like that's the only emotion I carry right now. Just so unbelievably angry. And my therapist is like, that's like been a theme. I'm like, yes, it
Yeah,
is 100%. And in between the anger is the sadness of the everything else, the finding joy
yeah,
again and learning to navigate a world that just kept on going after
yeah,
hours completely hard stopped. And
right.
I feel like for years and years we've obviously talked about this thing of grief. Um and in a sense I understood it as like when your grandparents pass away or when your parents are really old and they pass away. It's like you expect that to happen. You know it's a part of life. And then when you enter grief in terms of pregnancy and or infant loss, stillbirth in
Hmm.
our case, I'm like, what is this kind of grief? Like, it still doesn't make sense to me. And
Hmm.
I've always felt, because like I've talked to a lot of lost moms, they're like, all we do is cry and this and that. And I'm like, well, I don't cry. But over time, like my body is so stiff, like it's seizing. I'm holding it in like the very fiber. But
Hmm.
I think I've gotten so good at putting a wall up that I won't crumble. I will not allow
Hmm.
it. And I try. I'm like, oh, I could use a really good cry right now. It's like a tear. I'm like, that's not what I needed. But it's
Well,
like,
carrying on then.
I
Yeah.
don't understand. Like, how do you have the opportunity to like explain grief when you're walking with families, or what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, if I pull myself out of even like in a environment of a family, like let's just address grief in like a more general setting.
Hmm.
And to me, grief is our emotional and behavioral response to loss, not specifically to the people we love dying, right? So it's why we can apply it to divorce. It's why we can apply it to when our best friend moves. We can apply it to when a house burns down. Like there's just it can just be reapplied into to almost any setting. Now, when we start to focus in on one of the most obvious places is loss of a person, loss of a child, um, well, then we start to get a little bit more specific about it, right? So depending on again like circumstances or different things, sometimes we have what's called anticipatory grief. Usually that's attached in a setting where it's like we have a grandparent that's been in the nursing home for 10 years. We've watched them deteriorate over a period of time and we've kind of grieved them. Um, we've watched them disappear over years sometimes, or months
Yeah.
or weeks, or whatever the case is, right? Bereavement grief is like when loss takes place, right? Like that's unexpected loss. That is when it actually happens. And again, it's not to compare them. Like they're like, you know, I think one thing that's really important about grief is comparing loss is not typically a useful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Introducing your own experiences can be useful as long as they're not brought in as a fact of, oh, I know exactly what you're going through because this happened to me too. And it's just like, well, fuck you, you do,
Yeah.
because you can't apply this to the entirety of my life because our lives are not the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So comparing isn't typically a useful tool. The thing that I would say I try to help people acknowledge in the immediate parts of their loss, first of all, is how big of a deal it is that
Mm-hmm.
this happened to you, um, and trying to identify the parts of the emotions and their life that we know are going to be different, right? Society does a really good job of acknowledging primary loss, you know,
Mm-hmm.
meaning like they can see this person is gone, or they can see that you're no longer pregnant, but you don't have a baby at home with you. And we can see that, you know, and we get real fucking awkward when that happens because nobody knows what to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then they usually say the wrong thing. Well, God
Yep.
bless them.
Or nothing at all.
Um, or nothing at all. Um, and so we do that, but then to me, what's also an important step in those moments is like, okay, well, let's talk about all the secondary losses. You know, the awkward friendships, the people that you thought would show up for you that didn't,
Mm-hmm.
the people that came out of nowhere and held you and for no reason. And it, you know, like it just like all of these things that shift and shape and change and look completely different than it did the day before,
Yeah.
right? And so like it's just like again identifying these different places that loss is going to live as a part of that experience so that we better understand all of the things that we need to grieve and mourn, that it isn't going to just be this primary, you know, thing.
Mm-hmm.
um so it's like the identification of those types of things, and then I would say I would also right away introduce this idea of joy and sorrow coexisting. You know, that I think grief is one of the only environments that I'm aware of that two contrasting emotions cannot just be a part of the same experience; they can be a part of the exact same moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that even in the midst of the hardest thing of your life, you can be surrounded by people that you love that are holding you through it, and be incredibly grateful while being the saddest you've ever been.
Yeah.
You know, and both of those emotions have the opportunity to be present, and they typically are present at the exact same time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so it's just trying to show them those things because we've not really been taught like happy or sad, angry or joyful, you know. And it's just like, well, this isn't an either or environment, and the sooner we kind of adapt and understand that, well, then again it just starts to remove the pressure of having to feel one thing. And pressure is a big word for me in grief, because we typically do that to ourselves, where we put this pressure on ourselves, like it's like I just got to get my shit together, like
Yeah.
I gotta go to this parent meeting today. I gotta go to church. I gotta go to what, you know, whatever. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I got it. Like, I need to get it together. And it's just like, and as soon as we start to put pressure on environments that hold really big emotions, typically the only thing we're guaranteed to experience is guilt and shame. Right? No, I'm not doing a good enough job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a terrible husband. I'm a terrible wife. I'm a terrible dad. I'm not a good friend right now. And it's just like, it's just not helpful.
No.
You know, and so if we can just introduce these somewhere in the mixture of the immediate parts of loss, it certainly isn't going to reduce the hardship, but it's maybe just going to give us a little bit more predictability towards these emotions that are surfacing, you know. And the thing of why I get so focused on explaining the joy and sorrow coexisting is because I don't believe we are capable of just muting certain emotions. You know, like I grew up in a really wonderful house, wonderful parents. Generationally speaking, way more emotionally present than a lot of people likely were surrounded by. Still generational gaps though of emotion, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of the ways that we were shown to process big emotion was to ignore and override, right? Like just you tuck that shit in, you have a job to do, you have other kids to still show up for, you have a spouse that still needs you, you have all these people that are still depending on you. So like you just need to kind of hold on to this and keep going. And eventually it'll just get better. And it just absolutely fucking won't if that's what you do. It will
Good
just,
luck.
it will, yeah, right. Like
Yeah.
I think, there's probably 100 podcasts proving why that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, like the extension of that conversation then is to say, so okay, well, if we know we can't just push down on singular emotions, right? That I can't just ignore and override the sadness. Like if I push down on that, I'm going to push down on everything. So that also means I'm reducing my opportunity to feel joy. Because what happens and what I've seen typically happen is if I'm not going to fully allow myself to be sad, if I find myself in the midst of a good moment or a good day or enjoying time with friends or family or whoever it is, I also then like don't feel deserving of that experience.
Or
Right?
that you
Where it's
shouldn't
just
feel that
right because
because you're
but then
grieving.
right. And usually it's because you're trying to escape the sadness, like you rush out of that experience. So then you also end up rushing out of the good stuff. Whereas it's just my opinion that if you sit in the shit, like when it surfaces and that single tear rolls down your cheek. But when it comes up and instead of going like fuck, I don't have time for this today, it's
Yeah.
just like right? It's just like
Yep.
just stop, just sit in the discomfort and and let it take over.
Yeah.
And surprisingly enough, our bodies and our minds just don't want to stay there longer than they have to. So it's not usually like, well, the day is ruined. Well, you might have to like freshen yourself up before you go back to work. But that 5 or 10 minutes of just allowing yourself to like to feel the deep intensity of the emotion. And then when you re-enter the next part of your day and something good starts to happen, like you just feel so deserving of it. Right?
It's like letting
And
that pressure on your shoulders
yeah, get
like
rid of like
release. Yeah.
right, pressure, guilt, shame, right? Like
Yep.
and it's not just pressure, guilt, shame on the sadness. We do it to ourselves for all of the good things that are still happening in our life too. Yeah.
I liked what you said when you said happened to you. And then shortly after in a sentence, guilt and shame came up. And like how many times, and I can speak to personal experience, but it's like, what did I do to cause this? Or what did I do to deserve this? And, or, why didn't I make a different decision to change the outcome? And I'm specifically speaking to like pregnancy and infant loss. And then just so much guilt, so much all the time. And, it could be shame too. Shame that this happened to me. Shame that, I didn't save my baby because as parents, that's what we sign up to do. We sign up to, you know, keep these babies and children safe forever. That's our job. And when we not to it comes out naturally when we fail to do that. And it's not that thing. It is something that happened to you, but it's so hard to convince yourself that that statement is true.
I think we've been kind of raised or bred to believe that we have to hold somebody responsible when something bad happens, right?
We want
And
to almost.
yeah, like we desire
Yeah.
to be able to have something or somebody to focus on as the reason for this pain. And like that is what is so unimaginably hard about watching parents lose children. Because like there is you can spiral for as long and as deep as you want, and like there will be no set of answers that ever get you to a place of feeling more settled in the outcome.
Mm-mm.
You
No,
know,
you'll be chasing that forever.
yeah, and I think that's that's just unimaginably hard to grieve, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because we're never going to justify the ending to that, you know, to Letley's story or Cade's story, or, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
we're just never going to get to a point of, even if we go through these steps of attaching purpose and reintroducing hope and you know and allowing it to reshape us in really wonderful ways, no matter how good the outcome, never worth the price of admission,
Mm-mm.
right?
Hell no.
Yeah, and
Like,
that's just really sad. Like, you know, like I just even still think of like how tangible the feeling is of
mm-hmm.
watching Bode and George go through it, or like any of the families that we've had the opportunity to walk alongside.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like those are like, this is the shit I love. This is grief.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's just getting, yeah, I think just to lead by example, this is the
Mm-hmm.
unapologetic part of grief for me, where it's just like,
I'm
yeah,
reaching
sit in
there.
the shit.
Yeah.
Um, and from this place of it's just like, so like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna continue to speak openly just because I know
Please
Bodhi's
do.
such a mutual connection for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Letley absolutely has been an incredible part of my outcome. And as much as like I will have deep gratitude for this experience, the experiences of being trusted the way that Bodhi and George trusted me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's just never a way to tell that story that makes it worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And like the big emotion for me is an extension of the compassion for the moms and dads that feel this at an exponentially higher level. You know, that it, you know, and I just even think of like the opportunities I've had to sit with moms and dads that are like in their 80s and 90s, and you know, and we're writing an obituary, and you know, well, we lost an infant daughter, and, you know, okay, well, like put the pen down. It's like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more? You know, like what happened? You know, like what was her name? And it's just like, and it's just like, it's just this really incredible thing to see because when you create space for these moms and dads, regardless of age. I just did some therapy yesterday. I probably should have cried more there and got a little bit of this more of this out.
If it makes
But
you feel any better, I had
yeah,
like 10 tears fall, not just one.
yeah, good. Um, but you create space for these moms and dads to talk about these children because they're still so present in their
Mm-hmm.
life, and it's like it's one of my favorite parts of my career because even at 90 years old, like you just see this like this really wonderful, overwhelming emotion take over where they just get to talk about them.
Yeah.
And like that for some of these people, like maybe it's the first time in their life that they've had that opportunity because as a society, we do a pretty poor job of allowing moms and dads to talk about their kids that aren't physically present anymore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just, I'll try to get recollected here and figure out where I
No,
was
you do
going with this,
you.
but
I'm all about
it's just such,
authenticity.
yeah, I just think it's such an incredible thing, you know, and I think to me, this is the messiness of grief, you know, like we're just like where we can talk about purpose, we can talk about discomfort over resentment, we can start to move through this in a way that we try to reintroduce, you know, the things that there is the opportunity to find a lot of joy in grief
Mm-hmm.
and gratitude. Like, these are words I use. I'll say them over and over and over again through this conversation. And it doesn't matter, to what extent we're able to get to with those parts of loss. It just will never reduce how hard it is that they died, that they're not here with you.
Yeah.
And I think the purpose of that is to say, like, so that's not the goal. The goal is not to reduce or make this less difficult. It's to say that if we're going to pay the toll of suffering, then it just makes sense to me that we introduce these other things that allow us to, like, have contrast, that allow us to have a part of the experience that feels good. Because I have to suffer no matter what, but I'm going to have to choose to feel good while I do it.
Yeah. And I think
Right?
giving people the space to have those conversations, because as a society, we're not good at that. We're not,
Mm-hmm.
good at, there's still a lot of times, and I have a lot of friends that are very, really, really good. They'll even sign a card with to Cade still as a
Yeah.
part of our family. But then there's so many other people that don't even know how to say hi because they're like, well, is it going to come up? I'm like, yeah, it's going to fucking come up. I'll talk about him
Yeah.
24/7. I'll talk about him more
Right.
than my living children because I'm
Right.
trying to find, like, you see my living children running around.
Yeah.
And
Because it's easy for people to talk about them because they
yeah,
see him. They
yeah.
see them, right?
Whereas,
Um,
no, I'm gonna talk to you about him. Like, a lot of people have seen pictures of him, or we did have an open casket at his celebration of life. And, you know, I will never forget. I They had him in, yeah, okay. Um right before I had to give permission for him to, like, to close his little casket. It was like I was holding myself on the table because my knees were literally going to give out, and they were just, like, waiting for my head nod. And I, like, bent over him and gave him a kiss, and everybody, like, some people after, they were like, "Oh my god, like, we can't believe you did that," or like, "That was the most powerful moment," or, but just to see, because, like, if we didn't have that, nobody would have ever, like, maybe believed that he was here. Like, 'cause I obviously hung out with him for 37 weeks and 5 days, plus 20 hours. And other than that, like, that was it. And so for people, like, they don't have any memories with him or anything. And it's like, yeah, no, he was my baby. Like, it might be kind of weird, but I would have brought him home and kept him here forever. Like, he was just our baby. And, like, yeah, it's just a really hard thing for people to wrap their head around. And
yeah, it's such a, like, it's just so hard to conceptualize when life ends before it had the opportunity to begin.
that one
And
hit.
so,
That one hit.
yeah.
It's like, yeah,
um,
the hello and the
and
goodbye all in one
right.
breath.
And again, like, we've just been raised in these environments that, like, if we just gotta just get through school, and then when you get through school, you go to university or you stay home and work, and and then we need you to meet somebody, and and get a mortgage and a dog, and then you're gonna start having kids, and if you do all of these things in this particular order, like, we've been conditioned to believe not that life's going to be easy, but it should work out for you. And then it doesn't. And then it's
Like,
really
no
hard for us to
preparation. Like,
no.
if I had a crystal ball that would have told me, okay, 37 weeks, 5 days, your son is gonna die.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I would have spent that 37 weeks and 5 days doing much more than what I did. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
And I think, like, we're also not raised um under the impression that there is going to be an op that in life you may have to suffer through the experience of holding your child for the last time or seeing them for the last time, right? because it just goes so outside of the natural order of what we've been taught about life. And so when we end up in these environments of being at the funeral and watching mums and dads hold these people, these little guys, for the last time, or saying goodbye, or tucking them in, or closing the casket, it physically like knocks the air out of us, because I don't think until you've been a part of that experience you can even understand what that emotion is capable of feeling like.
Yeah.
And but once you've seen it, it just opens your eyes to a whole new part of your life that we didn't even realize people have had to go through
Yeah.
for from the beginning of time, right? And so why these conversations are so important to me is, well, we know that people have been experiencing child loss forever. For as long as people have been alive, children have died. But we have not talked about it. And still are not. I'm not saying we're knocking it out of the park yet, but like it's starting to surface. You can
Yeah.
see people are in pursuit of not wanting to. That the burden of grief isn't in the relationship with the child. The burden of grief is trying to keep them a secret.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
so
and
true.
so I think if we can give people the opportunity to not feel like it needs to be a secret, is just a really wonderful source of light to bring into something that's been probably a really, really dark time,
Yeah.
right?
And like you said, like
And
learning how to do that. And I'm not gonna not share him because it makes said person uncomfy.
mhm,
Like, imagine how I feel sitting in it every single day. Every moment there's a reminder that there's supposed to be 3 kids here. We're
yeah,
supposed to be doing this with him. Yet we're still
mhm,
fighting for justice of his life. We're still trying to learn to parent him from heaven.
mhm,
Learn or live for him. Give him a
mhm,
voice, which is, how this whole thing came together. It's like I ran a TikTok page for almost a year and it just like I couldn't show up anymore. I'm like, no, I need to like actually use my voice, not just sit
mhm,
here and type out what I'm feeling. Like, we need to have
mhm,
these conversations so people know it's okay to have the conversation.
mhm.
Like, you wouldn't want me to not talk about your living children, so why should we not talk about mine that didn't get the chance to live?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, it a normalization of the entire thing and learning to hold that space and learning what maybe is best to say, maybe what you absolutely should not say.
yeah, and I think it's this idea where um, when and I'll speak from my lens, being removed from loss in a sense of that I've been the person that's walking alongside that. It's not my loss. And like when you talk about the normalizing, I think that's such an important word to use, and when I talk about it from that, say that one step removed, or whatever the appropriate terminology is for that. When I talk about it, the goal is to say, like, wanting to normalize these conversations without dehumanizing them. That
Yes.
there's nothing normal about losing a child,
Hmm.
but we do want it to be normal for these moms and dads to talk about those children, right? So like and that's, I think, important for people that haven't experienced it as moms and dads, like that haven't like in that nuclear relationship, to realize that the normalization of this isn't to just get us to a place of saying, you know, that loss is typical. Like it's completely not typical.
Hmm.
Um, but the opportunity that we have is to allow these parents to absolutely gain a confidence in talking about not just Cade, but then like talk about the impact of this on your relationship with your spouse and the impact of this on the relationship with your other children or your parents or your siblings or your best friends, like all of these secondary losses. And when I say losses, what I mean is just like, it's just impossible for me to believe this doesn't completely change the dynamic of every other relationship in your life.
I can attest to that.
So it's the permission and the normalizing of all of those conversations. And it's not just sitting down and specifically in those days that you talk about Cade. You know, sometimes it's going to be sitting down and talking about like just hardship that is accompanying all of these other parts of your life. And most of those are going to engineer back into Cade not being here,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the part of like, again, not normalizing but not dehumanizing it, that, you know, like that we make sure that we don't remove ourselves so far from this, um, that we lose connection to like just how like that it's just still such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that if it's been a day or a week or a month or a year or 10 years, like it just happened,
Yeah.
because so many of these experiences are going to be brand new. And when you reach a new experience, that means this just happened to you again,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's probably going to look different than it did in the first days and weeks. You know, your response is going to change over time, like how you respond to these experiences. But like at the root of the emotion is going to still be a really intense, um, surface like loss. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that it's just like it's going to feel as raw as it's ever felt, even though it's been 10 years. And I think that's the part that confuses people, where it's just like, again, where we get into this like guilt shame thing, where it's like, Jesus Christ, like I'm 70 years old and like it just, you know, I woke up and had as bad of a day as I've ever had. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, well, yeah, but your son died.
Yeah.
And like, I just don't think any amount of time heals that part.
No. And there's such a societal pressure to do that. Like, even when Case was born, I'm like, are people gonna think that I'm just like over the loss of Cade and that this baby makes like fills a void, or
Yeah,
like it doesn't. If anything, it makes it harder that his brother's not here to do this journey with us.
yeah,
And like people really show up in the beginning, and then as the weeks and the years and the months go on, it's like this taboo thing of like, do we check in? Do we not? Like, they must be
yeah,
okay now. It's like,
right.
nope. It's almost sometimes
Yeah,
harder because you're like, okay, like we're coming up on his third birthday, and it's like, okay, 3 years, and he's still not here. And like, I don't
yeah,
want to believe that he's never going to be here. Like,
hmm,
but it's another harsh reminder. And having one child who is going through the grief with us, and one that will, when we eventually have to tell him that he has another brother, because they're gonna ask, well,
yeah,
who's this Cade guy that we talk about
yeah,
all the time? And like trying to navigate that grief on top of, well, she was 3 at the time and now she's 5, so we're 2 years into
right.
trying to understand more. She's like, why did he die? I'm like, girl, I don't know.
Yeah,
So
we'll
where's
never
heaven? I
know.
want to go there. I want to go to heaven. I'm like, same. Like, if we had, availability, girl, we'd be there every day.
Yeah,
Like, and yeah, the child's mind is so incredible with, how much they understand versus how much you think they'd understand, or the
hmm,
questions they come up, and they just need these distinct answers. Like, I don't have an answer for you. Like,
yeah. And
and
I think like I love walking kids through grief. It is hands down, like the highlight of my career. Like is the opportunity to walk children through loss. And yeah, because I think they're fascinating. I
yeah,
think like I love I love it when, if you can get a child feeling safe in an environment of grief, like watch the magic happen. You know, like where you show them it's okay to talk, you show them it's okay to ask questions, and it's such an incredible thing. And you know, and then what's, you know, which I continue to love, about, like, say, even like you talking about your daughter is 5 now,
Hmm.
um, where she will re-grieve her brother over and over again in each of these new chapters of her life, right? Like that, so why we need to talk about Cade when she's 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and so on, is because in each of those new years, she's going to be capable of entering a deeper part of the conversation. And like they're never going to stop. They're when they're showing it's okay to talk about it, I don't think they'll ever stop having questions. And here's why that matters to me. I believe grief is the extension of relationship.
Hmm.
I think it is probably the most likely place you have the opportunity to feel Cade's tangible, continued presence in your life. So to stop grieving means we're going to rob ourselves of the opportunity to continue to feel them.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't want that for you as a parent, and I absolutely would never want that for his sister or brother, right? And so it's just like, yeah, we're just going to lean in. We're just going to keep talking about him, and we're just going to keep saying, I don't know, because I'm just never going to have the answer to some of these things. And as you
Exactly.
get older, you're going to better understand that, but it's okay that you continue to ask, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just this really wonderful thing. And I think kids are just so capable of being a part of those conversations, in age appropriate ways, because the way we talk to you about this when you're 3 is not the same as when you're 5, and it is not the same if you're a 5-year-old boy as if you're a 5-year-old girl, because I love my son, but they are not functioning at the same level as little girls are.
Nope. They're too different.
Yeah, and it's just like this isn't a bad thing. It's just like, so it's again like we just have to get so specific about the child that
Yeah.
we're talking to, right?
Yeah. So then it's another
And
thing you're learning. It's like,
yeah,
okay, now we're
so
gonna teach this little kid what it's all about. And I think in
yeah,
a sense too, they pave the way because kids are so blunt. They're so honest.
yeah,
And they're not afraid to
100%.
ask the question. And like one thing I'm so proud of myself specifically is very much normalizing the conversation. Like to the point we'll be in the checkout at co-op and all of a sudden she's telling the cashier that she had this brother but he died and the cashier's looking at me like what the fuck. I'm like she's not wrong. She's like
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
couldn't
just
breathe, he died, we were sad, we were all heartbroken, but here we are. I'm like
yeah.
oh like
Okay, grab the Fruit Loops, let's go. Like it's time to hit the
yeah,
road.
like put this in your mouth, stop talking.
Yeah.
But in a
See
way
ya,
I'm
Barb.
like
Yeah.
yeah, like have a nice day. Like, and then I wonder why it looks like that's imprinted on my forehead that my baby died because she's out there telling everybody. But in a way, it makes me
Yeah.
so proud. I'm like, yes, let's
100%.
talk about him. Let's
Yeah.
not make it weird.
Imagine if we had the courage that these children did to
Honestly,
just say what we're feeling that day. And
yeah.
imagine how much less shit we would have to carry
Hmm.
if we could just say it right away and not have to hold on to it.
Exactly.
And that's what I love about children that learn to talk about these things.
Hmm.
And that's why I believe we have the opportunity when we introduce kids into loss at an early age and we allow them to be an active participant in their loss, which is called mourning.
Hmm.
When we allow children to mourn with us, I believe we change the entire trajectory of how they will walk through loss for the rest of their life.
Yeah,
Not
it's so
just
true.
when people we love die, when they get their heart broke for the first time, when their best friend moves, when something else big happens in their life, that there is so much learning attached to this. And if you are learning in one of the most intense environments of loss, which is losing a child or losing a sibling, um, if you learn those skills, you are arguably, in my opinion, set for life
Hmm.
on how to talk about hard things, right? And
Yeah,
it's just like I think it's incredible to me that that is something that can be taught to a 3-year-old,
yeah. Even when she was doing
right?
therapy, like we did play therapy with her, and like
Mhm.
her therapist even said, she was like, we are not equipped to deal with these things, and majority of children hopefully do not know this type of loss ever, like as human
Mhm.
beings. However, at 3 years old, she did learn that absolutely horrible things with no reasoning do happen. Now let's give you the skills to process these really big emotions. And
Hmm.
hopefully, when you're 16, or when, God forbid, she gets a boyfriend before that, if the heart is broken,
Yeah.
you have the tools to work through it. Or,
Right.
mom and dad walked me through much harder times of when my brother died. Let's lean in
Yeah.
on them. And
Right.
they're a safe place to again, normalize the feelings.
Right. And I think too what happens in those moments where like as moms and dads or grandpas and grandmas or aunties and uncles, like the adults that are in these people's lives, um, and I'll take a step back from, say specifically your family's experience,
Hmm.
like with Kate and your daughter, and like generalizing this into let's let's talk about a more like a more expected loss, like like when a grandparent dies, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I'm really wanting to kind of hone in on the kid thing right now.
Yeah,
So
please.
usually for children, the hardest part of when somebody dies isn't their relationship with that person. So at 3 years old, it's not typically their relationship with the person that died. It's watching their moms and dads say goodbye to somebody that they love so much. So like, and again, it's just the thing that I just love about watching kids in these environments is how naturally empathy comes to them.
Hmm.
Like they feel your loss. I would, and I will reapply that into some of your experiences without any type of certainty or expectation that it's right. It would make a lot of sense to me that probably some of the biggest parts of your daughter's grief is how much she feels yours and her dad's experience of losing a child.
Hmm.
And of course, those aren't the words that she's going to have for it. It's just what they're so capable of doing, you know. And I just love it. I just think it's just like, man, we just have so much to learn from
Hmm.
these little people if we just shut up and watch and listen to them. Like it's just like that as soon as we realize that we aren't the teachers in grief because we actually don't know what the fuck we're doing.
Not at all.
Um, and so we're on a level playing field. And what kids bring to the table that we don't is they don't have any, um, they don't have the emotional barriers that we do, where like we question everything.
Hmm.
And kids just kind of come in and go, okay, well, like, I mean, I'm here. Like,
Hmm.
it's just like they just show up with their feelings and it
Yeah.
just happens, like they just, well, I'm happy. And it's like, and just watch them. It's why kids can go from being like, like you can't console them. They're crying so hard and they're so sad. And then like 14 seconds later, they're running around the house screaming and laughing,
You're like,
right? Because it's
okay.
just like, well, and it's just like you watch them, and it's like like if it's like for me, it's like what I love. It's just like, well, just watch kids, because it's just like,
Yeah.
it's just like, well, for them, it's like this. Yeah, but well, fuck it, that's how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Like
They
I
don't
was
have time
feeling
to build
sad.
up those
I was
walls or
feeling
filter
sad,
it.
and now
Yes.
I'm not. Like
Yep.
it's just like because there's no pressure for them.
Yeah.
There's no pressure to feel a certain way based on whoever's here with me.
No.
It's just this is just how I'm feeling. So if I just need to throw a tantrum and get this shit off my chest, that's what I'm gonna do. And then I'm gonna have a cookie and a juice box. I'm gonna get emotionally regulated and I'm gonna restart my day. And it's just like we can do that too. It
Yeah.
actually is that simple. Like it's just like we complicate it.
Yeah.
And that's why I love watching kids go through it, is they don't make grief complicated.
No. They just feel it and move
They
through it.
make it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
That
just
just makes
so
me think
good.
back to when she was 18 months old, and obviously she was listening to us chat one time or other. And I was just like sitting there doing something. She's under the table, and I just hear, "I'm so fucking mad." I'm like, "Sorry?" I'm like, I have a video of it too. She looks at me, "I'm fucking mad, mommy." I'm like, okay, but like,
Yeah.
why? And I'm like, why are you so angry? And she's like, I don't know. Cool. They're fucking
Yeah.
mad. Like, yeah, same
Yeah.
girl, same.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like it is like I mean this is a distraction from the purpose of the talk today, but like it is quite the thing when kids are young and they swear in perfect context. You're like,
Mhm.
ooh, that was the absolutely appropriate use of the word,
Yep.
but you have to stop doing that.
And I'm like, okay, stop
No.
laughing. Like, I had to videotape it. Now it's like, no
Yeah.
more. Or even
I
when she
mean,
says stuff now,
turns
I'm like,
out I'm a great teacher. I'm just not
yep,
bringing valuable lessons to the table
yep.
sometimes.
I know
Yeah.
she's listening. I'm like, just don't say
Uh,
that at school. Don't say that at daycare. I'm like, oh God. It's so
yeah,
true. Oh my Lord.
that's so
How did
good.
you even get into like this line of work?
Yeah, it was not on the agenda at all.
Was not on my bingo
The
card.
yeah, the I'll give the shorter version of it is so in my grade 12 year, like when you're 16, 17 years old, like we start into that process of what are you going to do for the rest of your life. I think it's ridiculous. We'll talk about that later. That, and it was just like my response was, well, maybe I'll be a teacher or maybe I'll be a youth pastor. Like these are environments that I grew up in. My dad and my grandpa and my uncle were all well established in education.
Hmm.
We grew up in a church setting, and like I always enjoyed like youth groups and going to Bible camp and those types of things. And it was just like the trouble with both of those outcomes was like I hated school, and I definitely partied and drank and swore too much to ever be a youth pastor. So neither of them were actually real viable outcomes for me. And then in my grade 12 year, at the school that my dad was the vice principal of at the time. I got caught cheating on my social 30 diploma and almost got expelled. And fortunately made it through that experience and
Yeah.
was able to still graduate and not be expelled. But like coming home from that, rewriting that test, like we had to go to the city to rewrite it. And my parents were like, your aunt works at a funeral home in Calgary and they're looking for some help and we think it would be a good change of scenery for you to maybe go give this a try. And I'm like, what do you think? I was like, well, that sounds fucking terrible. No, I'm not interested. And they're like, no, like your suit's in the trunk. Like you're going to go do this interview. Like I was like, oh, okay. And so it was just like most things in my life, what likely started off as a really bad decision turned into something that worked out really good for me. I'm
Hmm.
super fortunate in having, you know, a mom and a dad in my life that for my entire life have just been in my corner.
Hmm.
And and like the older you get, you realize like what an advantage that is.
Hmm.
Because even at almost 40, like the impact of knowing they're in my corner is as powerful as it's ever been in my life,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, so I moved to Calgary and worked at the funeral home. Did it for about a year and got homesick. Didn't think it's what I wanted to do. um Came back and moved back home, which was in rural Alberta. Like, I mean, again, when you live rural Alberta, like there's pretty limited outcomes. So it was
Hmm.
like I ended up bartending and working in the oil field. Um, when tried to go back to school, I was going to do my Bachelor of Commerce, and once more hated school, so I dropped out of four classes. Dropped out of four classes and failed my fifth in my first semester, and I was like, "Yeah, I told you, I fucking never should have come in the first place."
Yeah.
And then and so moved back again, went into the oil field, um, and ended up having like a really terrible accident in the oil field that like I ended up like having to get like a surgery on my leg and was laid up for about 6 months. And it was just so in that window of time. And like all of this happened between 18 and 20. And so I was 20 years old at that point in time. And we just kind of started talking. It's like, well, like, what's next? I was like, well, the only thing I've really done since graduation that I was connected to was working at the funeral home. And again, like words that I didn't have then, but that I definitely can put words to it now is even at that stage of my life, I think I was really deeply connected to watching the ways that families trusted funeral directors to join them in this in the immediate parts of their loss. And that has always been something that I've never taken for granted. Like I just think it is we have such a massive opportunity to have impact and to serve in that environment, right? And so I re-entered funeral service at 20, and I've been doing it ever since. And and I that emotion, that feeling is as present now as it's ever been for me. Like I just like the opportunity to sit with a family, and I just think of it like from this place of like there is nobody else in the world has accessibilities to families in the immediate parts of their lives like we do. And I just think that is such a special thing to be able to do. And so it's just like it wasn't on my agenda, it wasn't on my radar. And then it's like, when I go back and I start thinking about being 16 and 17 years old and answering those ridiculous questions of what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And then I think about what I'm doing now and I'm going like, yeah, but I'm teaching. And I'm
Yeah,
teaching about something
100%.
that I love. And one of the groups that I spend the most amount of time with is kids and youth. So it's just like I'm absolutely doing the things that I thought I wanted to do when I was 16 and 17. It's just the vehicle that I'm in is completely different than I imagined.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, like again, I'm not a terribly religious person, but it's just like believe in something bigger than us, and I still call that God. And so it's just like these are the moments where it's like, okay, I'll allow the term God's plan to come in these parts of the experience, right? Where it's just like, because like there's no way I could have predicted these outcomes.
No.
And I know I wasn't in control of them. And so it's just like, so it's neat to me to see when these dots start to get connected.
Yeah.
And that's the part for me that like, it's why I hope I get to live a long life. Because the more time we have, the more opportunity we get to reflect. The more we reflect, the more we introduce new perspectives or broader perspectives, which allows us to see it like a more full picture of like, and for me, all of it engineers into gratitude. Like I've been offered such a good life. And I think for some people that's like, obviously the things that are easy to see about that is that I have 3 healthy kids, that I have a family that loves me, that I have a career that I love, like all of these things. So like I think those are the surface level things that are easy for people to see. I think the parts that are hard for some people to understand is just that like most of my gratitude comes from a place of watching people having to say goodbye to the people that they love that have died, right? Like I've gotten so much meaning out of my life from having had the opportunity to watch people do this on an almost daily basis. And it's just so special to me that career has offered me this lens at such a young age, that I still hopefully have 40 or 50 or 60 years to continue to live. And I feel like I've already had access to a lifetime of knowledge.
I love that. And
Yeah.
arguably, I would say you are teaching one of the most important things to these
Yeah.
children, like fuck the math. You don't even use it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, here's how we
Yeah.
process the hard shit.
I mean, based on my own experiences, it turns out that social 30 diploma was not that important. Um, it didn't really interfere with my outcome. Some might say cheating projected me into one of the best parts of my life.
Right?
So, yeah, no need to study for those tests, kids. You're going to be fine. It's
Parents will be like, shut the fuck
yeah.
up.
Yeah, just hit stop on the podcast at the minute 4 mark. Just don't let
Yeah.
him say that last piece. Yeah, yeah.
I'll preface the whole episode.
Yeah, yeah. Tell your kids to hop off this podcast at an hour 4 minutes in. Nothing good comes after that. So,
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think if there's like, I know I sent you a little list of things.
yeah, it's so funny. And like
I don't
again,
know.
in my transparency of not being good at school or doing homework or things like that, I don't even remember the list you sent me, to be honest. So
Me
so
neither.
please ask away if we've if there's anything else, I'm like happy to keep leading in. So yeah,
No,
but
this
oh,
is
it's so
so
good.
good. What would be like your biggest piece of advice for families, I'd say in the early stages of loss or even
Um,
like far down the road?
so the how to enter into hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that uh, there are tangible steps that we can follow, and these are the steps that I would follow. So I'm going to use this as my opportunity to continue to teach about, say, talking to our kids about hard things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easy to reapply this into talking to each other as adults, or talking to our parents, or talking to anybody. Um, you like the steps that I follow is like you have to lead with excruciating vulnerability. That if I do not show you how hard this is for me, I think it's pretty unfair for me to expect for you to show me how hard this has been for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if I can do that, and if I can show that to you, and you believe that this is hard for me too, that creates a connection, right? So when we lead with excruciating vulnerability, it creates a connection. When we become connected in environments of grief, it leads to more meaningful relationship. If I can get to a point of more meaningful relationship with you, we automatically attach more trust to that environment. And if I can do that, then you're actually going to allow me to have a seat at your table. Now I'm going to start to actually tell you what this has been like for me. And if I skip any of those steps, I think it's unfair for us to expect the other person in that conversation to fully share what's going on in their life.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful.
Yeah.
I like that. You write that one down for my back
Yeah,
pocket?
I know. I was like,
Oh.
fuck, I should have been making some notes. I've got so many posts I can make after talking today. Um,
You can press
so good.
play, rewind, pause when you're
Yeah,
listening to it.
exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so you do run your Instagram page. That's the one that I follow. And if you have any other platforms, please do share. But where can everybody find you?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, my Instagram and Facebook. And so the platform that I use is called Death Ed. It's my website is www.deathed.ca. Which it's funny, I've never picked this up, but it was like one person was like deathed, deathed.ca. I was like, oh
That's
yeah,
what
that,
it took me a look.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, and I was like, I might maybe it's time for a rebrand. But for now, uh deathed.ca, that's where we're at. And honestly, like probably the best space to find me is just in that Instagram. Like Instagram for me is it's just my journal. Like it's just like where I
Mm-hmm.
go and I write my feelings, and I just let everybody else read it. Like, and it's kind of that's what keeps it such a healthy space for me. It's not I don't attach a lot of pressure to myself to show up there any more than what feels appropriate for me. And when I do, it's just like I just write these little letters to myself, and then let the world read them.
I love that.
So
Again, the
yeah,
authenticity of it all, right? And,
yeah,
allow other people to feel safe to do that themselves. Like,
yeah.
that's what
It's
your
such
social
a
media is there for. It's your social media.
yeah, and it's just like I think it's just honestly I'm really grateful for the community that's kind of built around that.
Hmm.
And it's really neat to see how people, yeah, they're just really showing up for themselves and one another. I just love it. It's just so good. Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's there cheering
Yeah.
you on too.
It's just so good. It's all good.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I feel like
Thank
this has been
you.
a great talk, a wonderful re-entry into podcasts. So yeah,
Right? I'll
thanks
circle
for this
back in a
opportunity.
while.
Yeah,
Come on
yeah,
back.
let's do it.
We got more
Anytime.
to
I love it.
unpack.
Yeah, it's so good. So great. Well, thank you again.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Please take a moment and on whatever app you're listening to us on, press that follow button to stay up to date with all future episodes. If you or someone you know are interested in being a guest on the Beyond the Birth Story podcast or a sponsor, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at Beyond the Birth Story podcast and send a message or fill out that contact form. I would love to connect with you. As always, remember to be gentle, kind, and hold space for yourself when you need it.